My name is James Lenishman. I'm the CTO of ImageSoft, and today's session is Best Practices for OnBase System Administrators. Don't get better than that. So, how many of you are system administrators? Not by choice. At the end of this session, you will be.
No, really, I don't want to be. I want to hire one.
Oh, that's good too.
Which county do you work for?
Wait.
I'm from Monroe, and I'm still trying to get them to do it. Hey, Diana.
So I'm the only person who's had a session that's actually a job posting now. You remind me, I got to turn off mute.
This is a socialing network here now.
It is. Facebook. How many of the system administrators or even nons manage some aspect of the hardware or software that's not OnBase? So like the OS or the database. So a good number of all of you. So, we put together an agenda that we want to try to cover some of the newer things that people have been talking about. If you haven't been able to get to OTTC or if you haven't been able to get to a tech quest, some of these items are kind of the newer items of the last year that we think system administrators should know, specifically the first two. The last two are kind of my soapboxes that I always like to harp on, so anytime they give me a place to speak, I will talk about them. So we're going to spend most of the time on really incremental and parallel upgrades. So I want to dive right into that. So has anyone heard of incremental and parallel upgrades?
Yes.
Okay. So what is it? So it's a phased approach to upgrading your OnBase system, allowing both the old and the new versions of OnBase to run in parallel. Hence the name. Why do it? It can greatly reduce the risk of production downtime, and it greatly reduces the impact to your user base who doesn't want to upgrade. Everyone asks, can I do it? Yes, it applies to all versions. It's not like it came out in 11.0 or it came out in 12.0. This concept has been around since day one, so it applies to your version of OnBase. I don't care if you're on 3.5. No one's on 3.5, right? So I felt comfortable saying that. So I always like to kind of do a compare and contrast so we all kind of get on the same page and really see the benefits of it. So what did upgrades of the past look like? Well, they were what I call the Big Bang approach. All users, all departments, all servers, all components, everything. You upgraded it all in your production environment. You typically had to do this over a weekend or a long holiday, which always made those more fun. You had a short period of 2 or 3 days to get it all done, to get it all rolled out. Some of the challenges were getting all of your departments to test, right? So as your system has grown, it's brought on more departments and more departments, getting them all to test and go, yes, we've tested the latest version that you're going to roll out, and we give it our thumbs up. Sometimes it doesn't happen, or you find out, 2 weeks before the planned event that this department over here actually didn't test. And that holds up all of these departments who have tested. And so all of a sudden I've got 4 departments who are ready to go, and one of them stops it. Has that happened? You don't have to raise your hands. The other headache is I'm running around to every PC, or I'm using group policies, or I'm using scripts, and I'm pushing out things to PCs. And the larger you are, the more PCs I'm impacting. And although that all can be automated, we all know even the automated stuff sometimes doesn't work. And then after the upgrade, you just kind of wait and see what fires remain, and you hope that they're fixable. Sometimes a fire you can put out, sometimes it's a fire that you can't. It's a problem that you didn't know about, and it's not, you can't put it down. What do they look like in the future? Parallel upgrades. And there's an acronym, IPUP or whatever, you'll see sometimes on the Heinlein sites. Incremental parallel upgrade process. It doesn't roll off the tongue, so I try not to use it and end up saying it wrong. The beauty about this process is it's a phased approach. It can take as long as you want or as short as you want. But typically we see it happening over 30 days, 60 days, sometimes even longer, 90 days. It's on your schedule, right? You're doing things during the time frames that make sense to you. In most cases, during normal business hours. If you start something in an emergency, because we all know you do more than just administer OnBase, if an emergency happens, you can put this aside and tackle that emergency, right? So it allows you to control the upgrade and deployment of OnBase on a schedule that meets your needs. You only upgrade a few components at a time, or a few users at a time, or a few departments at a time, so you're able to limit the risk to the group, and you're able to limit the impact that one department who chooses not to test has on anyone else. The goal of it is the previous version is always there. So I can always launch and log into my old version of OnBase, and I'm accessing the same system. I'm not accessing a copy of it. I'm hitting that same core system, and I saw a hand.
Yeah, I think the answer is no, but this does not apply to a LibertyNet to OnBase upgrade, does it?
The answer, unfortunately, is no. Though, in a system like that, you actually get a little bit more flexibility. So come and talk to me afterwards. Okay. You might have some options that are different because of what you're doing. This is not an excuse for your departments to skip testing. That kind of makes sense, right? And then, someone once told me that you have to say something 7 times before it sinks in. So we're going to do it PowerPoint style. Not an excuse to skip testing. And for the test afterwards, parallel upgrades are...
Not an excuse to skip testing.
Bingo. No test, but... Okay.
Where's my baseball?
I don't know. They have it out front. I saw it. I'm going to talk about it really quick, just kind of level set, a high-level understanding of what the parallel upgrade process is. At a high level, I start by upgrading the database. That's it. If I upgrade my database, I don't have to change a single other thing. I can do an upgrade of a database one evening. Right? It generally takes 20 to 30 minutes. I can do that, on a schedule that meets. Once I've upgraded a database, I don't have to touch anything else. All my machines can continue to run. There's no problem with older versions of OnBase talking to a newer version of the database. Then I deploy, again on my own schedule, new web servers, new thick clients as needed to different departments, to different groups of users. I typically, so let's say I was upgrading, one core, or maybe a clerk's office. I might pick 2 or 3 power users and upgrade them only, so that even if they found a problem, I'm not impacting the majority of the users. I'm impacting just a couple users, and if they find a problem, they just log off and log into the other icon on their desktop, and they're back to the way they were for years. Right? And I can then address that problem quickly, but I'm not causing a loss of downtime at this point, right? Or a loss of functionality. They're back to the system that they've been using. I address that problem and try it again. Once that small set of users has tested it and you've worked out any issues if you find any, again, not an excuse for not testing, but any additional issues, then I can deploy that to the rest of that department and then phase out the old components of my OnBase system that I've completely upgraded. So I'm going to show kind of a picture of what it looks like. I think that will help a lot. So let's say this is your OnBase system. It's a very simple picture. I'm missing, or I don't have all the components that you might have. I don't have fax integration. I don't have app servers, and I'm not showing Outlook, but needless to say, it doesn't matter. So you might have a database, a storage server which stores all your images. You've got maybe traditional thick clients. You might have some web clients. You'll notice that I put the version number underneath all of them. I didn't put the version number underneath your storage system, your disk groups, because it doesn't matter. The first step you do is you upgrade your database to version 11. That's it. I've started my parallel upgrade process. I haven't changed anything else. I do that on one night or a weekend. I could walk away for 3 weeks. No problem. System's running, everything's good, no other problems. Because of the way OnBase is structured, all the business logic, all the things that are important to you, how it works, how it honors security, how the workflows interact, those are all maintained and processed by the web server as the thick client. The logic or the configurations in the database, but none of the business logic, right? That's purely a data layer. My other tiers are my processing. They understand it. So I haven't really changed anything. This application is the application you installed 2 years ago. It's the same exact program. You haven't pushed anything out. It is that executable or that web server. They're unaware that anything just happened. Then, it's a little bit more complex, but I basically deploy new thick clients, new web server, and new web clients. I do this on my time schedule. So I stand up a web server during normal business hours. Right? I test it. If I'm happy with it, I have my users install the web client during normal business hours. And if they have a problem, they go back to their old web client. And they can run on the same machine. Same with the thick client. So I can actually go to a machine, a user, and say, let's log into the new website. And I don't have to worry about ActiveX control problems. All those versions will run side by side with each other. So again, I'm able to do this on a timeline that meets my needs. And again, you're not rushing. This isn't like you're doing all this on a weekend. In the old way, you would have had to do all of this on a weekend, make sure it works, and make sure come Monday morning at 8 o'clock, all of these were going and there were no problems. Here, you're doing it on your schedule, and if some other issue comes up in the middle, you're able to delay or move adjust your schedules as needed. Once everything's up, deployed, you've phased in your users' testing, your users' use of the system, and now you've phased everyone over to the latest version, you just decommission your old boxes, and you're now on version 11. So you've done a very phased and parallel upgrade. Another thing that some people will come and say, hey, we're on version 10. I wish we could use Unity Briefcase, but it wasn't out till version 11. But we're not interested in upgrading. And so it's unfortunate, right? And that they kind of just say, I wish I could, but we're not going to upgrade. Well, I call these kind of non-traditional upgrades. So you could be on version 10, have no intent on upgrading. Your teams aren't looking to upgrade for another 2 years. But you have a group of people who want to leverage the Unity Briefcase, or maybe you have a new department, an HR department that's coming on. There's nothing that says that you can't upgrade your database, spin up a new server for a brand new department or a brand new group of users. It's not really an upgrade in the sense of I'm upgrading my existing user community, but it is an upgrade to power a new group of users to leverage things like the newer technologies. So as OnBase and Highland come out with newer things like the Unity client or their advanced capture, which was talked about in the beginning, or different features with the web server, I can actually do this same approach, but not upgrade any existing users, bring on a new community base. The last thing on this is there is a document, and I don't know how many people actually go up to the community site at Highland. It's a very good site. I definitely encourage you to go up there. If you go up to the Highland community site, they have a blog on this. It's a little bit hard to get to, but it's basically under technical, OnBase technical forums, and then it's upgrading. They have a document. It's a good document that talks in a lot more detail than what I went into, but it gives some examples. The end of the document actually has some module-specific things that you need to think about. So, for example, if you're in Court View, there's a section about things that you need to be aware of with Court View. If you're leveraging integration with like PeopleSoft or Oracle or SAP, it talks about them. In most cases, there's nothing to worry about, but if there are some things, it's in here. So this is a good document, and I would definitely encourage it. And then, if there's any questions, there's a blog. You can post them there. ImageSoft, we're always here for you. But definitely, they can help fill in any of those gaps. Another item that we want to talk about is virtual servers. So how many people currently run OnBase in a virtual environment? Great. How many people don't run it in virtual but are looking to move to virtual? Okay. Well, that's good, actually, because we will actually have people here who will be able to tell you that the myths that I'm saying are myths and not true are really not true. So the first myth is it's not supported. That's not true. OnBase in a virtual environment is fully supported. In fact, for those of you who are aware, OnBase has an online cloud offering that AJ talked about. It is all virtual. So their cloud offering is 100% virtual. The second myth is it's for small systems only, and that's not true. One of the largest OnBase customers is 100% virtual. They happen to be our customer. I toot my horn a little bit. Their database is 1.2 terabytes. It's virtual. Their system has over 220 million documents, and they load 250,000 documents a day. And they have 1.2 billion transaction log entries. So if any of your database administrators go, your transaction log history is too much, tell them no, it ain't. They don't even know what too much is. 8 terabytes of storage, 20 processing machines, and 1,000 plus active users, all in a virtual environment. It's very nice, and it does allow them to do a lot of fancy things. I've seen them vMotion their database from one location to another without their users ever knowing it. So if you have the right technology, you really can do a lot of nice things. So what are some of those things that are made easier in that virtual technology? Create test environments. That's something that can be done very easily. I can just snapshot a machine. I can snap up a machine and bring it down to a workstation and run it in VMware Workstation and run that same machine locally and bring 2 or 3 down and build an isolated test environment literally as an exact copy of my production environment fairly quickly and run it locally on my local machine or on a separate set of test servers. Don't forget kind of the power of the snapshot, right? That ability to take a machine and snapshot where it currently stands. You wouldn't do this for your SQL server, but for any processing machine, a machine running dip or a web server, if you want to apply service packs, snapshot it. If you have a problem, you can roll back to that prior snapshot. You know, in the olden days with physical machines, that was, you know, backing up that whole machine, applying it, and then if you had a problem, you decided whether the time it would take to fix the problem was more or less than the time it would take to blow the machine away and restore from tape. You know, now if you got a problem, you blow the machine away, you snapshot, you go back to the snapshot, you figure out why you had a problem, but your users aren't impacted. Spinning up new servers for our parallel upgrade, right? So one of the things that we talked about in that parallel upgrade was, you know, having a second web server, right? I can take my existing web server, snapshot it, build it as a second web server, upgrade it. Now I've got a second web server in a lot less time. And as we kind of hinted on, HR and DA, so, or DR and HA, leveraging that virtual technology to get high availability or disaster recovery. Out of the box, virtual technology isn't going to get you either of those, but it does make it easier because that virtual technology does allow you to do things like vMotion and replication of that data across data centers, and replication of even the memory across data centers, so that I can lose a machine and have it come up in the right state at the other location. Kind of a couple closing items on virtual server technology. There's a blog on there, on the virtual server, on the Highland community. Definitely look at that. You will probably, to get the most out of it, so that customer that I said, you know, had, you know, 1.2 terabyte system, they just did not click setup.exe on SQL Server and call it good, right? There is tuning that needs to go on. There is balancing between your storage system, because in virtuals you typically have some type of shared storage. There's tuning in your storage, there's tuning in the VM environment, there's tuning at the OS level and the database level. The good news is that this is the way it's going. This information is out there. There's a ton of information on there. But I just do want to do a word of caution. Don't just spin up like a free version and click setup and think it's going to run twice as good. You will not be happy with it, which I think is why some of the myths about it can't handle big loads, because it does take a little bit extra work to make it run right. It's not really from an OnBase standpoint. There isn't really from an OnBase standpoint. We don't really have any additional things, but just that standard OS and hardware. There's some nuances that need to go on. So let me jump to what I always like to harp about, backups. So best practices in storage and backup. Back up your database, you back up your disk groups, you will sleep well at night. That is OnBase. If you can get those things backed up every night and you know they're backed up, you got no problems. You can recover from any event. as long as your tapes aren't next to where your server is.
So OnBase use SQL Server as a backend?
OnBase uses, in most cases, it's Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle.
So if we already have Oracle, we can...
Yep. Yep. It will leverage Oracle system and...
Any limitations?
No. No. I need to know the version, but I mean, we support anything like 8, 5, and higher. So back up your database, back up your disk groups. That's it. That is your OnBase system. Everything else is a processing station. It's a stateless machine that you can install. Now, granted, you could take your backup procedures a little bit further and create images and clones. And with VM technology, that's a lot easier to create these clones and back them up. But you could rebuild those from a CD. You can't rebuild the data in your database or the data in your disk groups from a CD. You need those backed up. So make sure those are backed up. Database backups. And I want to hit on this one because it's important, and most people probably know it. But if you don't, a database, you can't back up a database by just doing a simple file copy unless you shut that database down. You need an agent. Whether you're using the agent that comes with Oracle, or you're using the agent that comes with SQL Server, or you're using an agent that comes with the third-party backup software, that's fine. But if you think you're backing up your database by just copying the raw files off the SQL Server, you're not. It's not backed up. You backed up a bunch of garbage that's filled up tape, but it ain't going to run. Our recommendations are full nightly backups, transaction log backups every hour or two, shorter as needed. We've got customers who do transaction log backups every 2 minutes. So based on your need, it has a lot to do with what kind of recoverability, what your SLAs are to your users, what kind of data loss is acceptable or not acceptable. And we definitely recommend, although it's often not possible from a financial standpoint, to back these up, these transaction logs up to a different server so that they ultimately get onto tape at the end of the day, but during the middle of the day, the intraday backups go to a different server. Most likely they go to your same server, but if you can get them to a different server, it's better. That way, if something were to happen to your server, like self-combust or something like that, at least you have the data to take last night's database backup, all of today's transaction log backup, and theoretically not lose any data. Verify they are archived to tape. This one's hard because I know a lot of times you guys aren't the people who administer your backups. And I got a slide about that in a second. But verify they're administered to tape. A backup is like a parachute. You only know it's good once it opens, right? And if you just got the tape and you've never tried it, you don't know that it's going to work. But you got to test it. Disk groups. So again, your key, back up your database, back up your disk groups. That's key. Don't just back up your database and think you have your whole OnBase system. The database has all the metadata, it has all the history, it has all the knowledge about the documents. It does not have the documents. The documents are stored in the disk groups. So make sure you back them up. There will be a point in time where your storage gets so large that your backup team isn't able to back it up every weekend. Come and talk to us. The system is designed to account for that. There's things that we can do within how you structure your storage to allow your backup teams to back up just subsections of that. The way OnBase stores data, it never changes it. So you don't have to worry about, it's not like a file server where anybody can change any file. It does it in such a way that I can build backup plans that exclude large parts of it because I know I've got 8 copies of them in long-term permanent storage and nothing will ever change on them. So if you get to that point, don't throw your hands up and have your backup team get upset with you. Come and talk to us. There's definitely ways around it. Verify the tape. Test it. And you might think about using multiple copies, right? So the benefit of a multiple copy is if I did lose one of my storage servers, I can actually continue to have people function in OnBase while I'm rebuilding it because it has a second copy. So multiple copies are basically like having a second copy of everything, just like I could do within a SQL server. It helps your basically high availability positioning. Some people ask, how do I know that things are getting backed up? Right? My backup team tells me they're getting backed up, but I don't know if they're getting backed up. I don't, the spider senses are tingling. one easy way, now my biggest caveat is this isn't always the case, and as newer technologies, especially in the virtual environment, come in, this doesn't always apply. But if you don't see this hint, you definitely should ask, how they are doing the backup. Most systems, if you look, this is a disk group. This is actually who, if you're an administrator, you've probably seen a system like this. This is actually our disk group at our office for one of ours. And you can see, if I bring up my attributes, there's ones with an A in it. Those haven't been backed up. Right? Now, granted, it was on the 4th when I did the demo, or grabbed a screenshot. So I can see that everything from before the 4th was backed up. I did this the morning of the 4th, so this stuff hasn't been backed up, and that made sense to me because the backup hadn't run that night. So if you go into your system and you see A's on things that are weeks old or months old or, heaven forbid, years old, ask your team what they're backing up. And if they tell you they're backing up their system, ask them how, because those shouldn't be there in most cases. So just a little trick. It's not 100% foolproof, but it has caught a number of cases where they weren't being backed up properly. And again, nothing beats a test run. You need to get your team to restore the data or get you access to the ability to restore that data. We've had a handful of customers who have unfortunately had to go back to tapes, and in all of those cases they've been fortunate enough, but that's not the industry standard. Right? The industry standard isn't as pretty a picture as our customers have experienced. Right? Test those tapes. Make sure, you've got two things going against you. The quality of the tape, is it lasting? Just did they get all the data? And in today's environments where there's so much data now in networks, right? Tons of it. Backup administrators are often making decisions about what to back up, what not to back up, how often to back up, not necessarily understanding the impact, right? This is a file server, but this file server holds your records, right? And without it, you're dead. Where this file server holds, documents and stuff like that. And maybe they're not as important, but maybe that individual who's doing the backup is not aware of that. So really work with that team so they understand that, the importance to the data that you're storing. And again, test the restore. It's better to do it on your schedule than Mother Nature's schedule. How much time do we got? Okay. 15? Perfect. Daily, weekly, monthly tasks that administrators should be doing to keep your system healthy. So don't wait for it to get sick. Don't wait for it to be complaining. It'll give you signs way before it gets really bad if you know where to look. And again, the Heinlein training site, which you can get to from the community site, has a ton of information on it. They have an administrator's task card series, which is like a 21-step little videoettes of doing all of different things. They have a ton of information. This is all free to you. Right? Heinlein has premium training on top of that, but just a standard base training, all free to you, part of OnBase. Go up there, definitely take a look at that. I encourage that. So let's just start with kind of what I recommend, what we do as ImageSoft with our OnBase system, and what we recommend to our administrators. Daily tasks, and I put or weekly because I realize that you don't necessarily get to do these every day. The beauty about the daily tasks, and even most of these, is that with a little bit of research and maybe a little bit of funds, you can automate a lot of these things. So, verification reports. For those of you who are familiar with OnBase, you know that as things come in, OnBase generates reports about what it liked, if it didn't like anything, if things appeared to be missing. These are called verification reports. Every batch job that OnBase runs results in a verification report. You should check those reports for errors or warnings. You could build a workflow to check those for you and notify you if it found a problem. One might ask why it just doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's a good test. So check those reports or build a really simple workflow to check those reports for you. It's quite simple. Add the reports to the workflow, do a quick check of the text. You're good to go. Event logs. This is probably the one area that I think is overlooked way too many times. And it'll give you hints about things that are going wrong, like running out of disk space, or errors, to controllers, to battery failures. You know, they'll tell you a lot, not only about your OnBase system, but about the software and the hardware. Check the event logs for errors and warnings. And I put in here unexpected informational messages, right? If you are checking event logs, you might actually just be skipping anything that's blue, right? Because you know it's information, you know it means nothing's wrong. Well, it means nothing's wrong. It doesn't mean nothing's not out of the ordinary. So we had a customer who had a problem. Their users were getting kicked out of the web client, right? And they didn't know what was going on. They'd be running around, and all of a sudden they'd all get kicked out. And they're like, I'm seeing nothing in the event logs, right? Everything's blue. So, like, okay, well, you've got something going on. So we get in there and we look at their event logs, and yes, everything was blue, and in the middle of the day, there would be a blue icon that says restarting the web server, right? Well, I'm like, why are you restarting the web server? What are you doing in the middle of the day? Like, oh, we're not doing anything. Well, that's why your users are getting kicked out, right? And they were able to track it down, and that being their antivirus software. Their administrator had changed their antivirus software, so it caused the web server to get restarted at certain times of the day out of the blue because it was touching a file, and the web server would automatically restart. So it was a benign, very normal message, but it was unexpected. And so again, that's why I go back, is look at those. Warnings and errors, definitely look at. But look for the informationals. They will tell you if things are just running differently. And that'll help you figure out maybe what's going on. There is a number of tools out in the market, some free, some that aren't free, that will kind of take your tools from a handful or messages from a handful of sources and augment them or notify you. So again, you might not have the time, and that's why I say weekly, to go in and look at the logs every day. There are some third-party tools out there that you can actually get that'll just send you an email if it sees something odd. So, you know, some of these tasks you can actually automate. Weekly tasks, verify to the best of your capabilities your database and your disk groups are backed up. Don't forget about the A check. And I always say go back to your backup team, right? You should not have the best relationship with your backup person because your system is growing every day, probably faster than most other systems. And so if they aren't yelling and screaming, going, you're taking up more space every day, they probably aren't backing up your full system. So check with them. How much are they backing up? How big was that backup job every week? You should see it grow. And the size of the job should be about the size of your database and storage. And if they aren't, you've got a problem. Check to make sure you have available disk space on your server. You don't want to run out of disk space. And your database server can grow quickly. It can go from having 3 or 4 gigs available to having no gigs in a matter of like a sub-second. And it's just the way SQL servers or Oracles work. It does it in a way that makes sense, but it will chew up large chunks of data as it gets more data. So don't run too close to the edge because you could take down your SQL server. The last thing is, and again, you can build automated processes to do this. So you have folders that jobs get, dip jobs, cold jobs for those who administer it. Make sure those remain empty. Right? If you've got files left in there, then you've got a problem. That file wasn't pulled in. You either wasn't pulled in, or you didn't have something configured, or some file came over wrong. Check for the air files folder. That's OnBase's way of saying it had a problem. They should be empty. Now, if you go in and you look at a folder and it's got 3 files from like 2 minutes ago, that's probably not a problem. They're going to get picked up because the scheduler runs every couple minutes. But if you go in and you see files from an hour ago, or a day, or a week, or a year, you got a problem. Monthly tasks, typically recommend you. Oh, go ahead. Oh, 5 minutes. Sorry. Okay, I'll be quick. Monthly tasks. Just verify your database maintenance plans. So when we set up your system, or you set up your system, you set up some database maintenance plans to back up the database, back up the transaction log, but also update statistics and kind of other health keeping. Those take a duration of time, and that duration of time is dependent upon the size of your database. As your database has grown, they now take longer. So you might have set those up to run at 11 p.m. thinking they were going to be done at midnight, and now they're running to 12:15 or 12:20 and competing with other jobs. So just look at those on a monthly basis, make sure they're running, and make sure that they're still running in the windows that you thought you wanted them to run in. The last thing is analyze your recent volumes in your disk group. So OnBase has platter management, so I can go in and run a report that says, for every document that should be in this volume, right, if I go back here to here, for every document that should be in like V22, make sure it's there. So I can go into OnBase and do that. I can set up a job and I can schedule these jobs to look for that. So we recommend that on a monthly basis, you just go in and run against all the new volumes and make sure they're there. If you store multiple copies, add the option to have that job do a bit-by-bit compare against the other copies. So I can say not only is it in copy 1, it's in copy 2, and they match 100%. That way, if I lose copy 1, I'm still able to retrieve, and my users are actually unaware that they're pulling data off a secondary backup copy. Questions?
Can I get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes, they'll be on the web. Rick, they'll be up tonight or within a day, but they'll be on the web. And I think they'll even put my voice audio in there too for you.
Oh, really?
Exactly. I'm sorry. We are here. ImageSoft support is here for you. So, if you have other questions in the future or anything, definitely reach out to us. The community site, the training sites I mentioned, also a lot of good information. But, we are here for you. Ask questions. Call our support department. Rick in the back manages our support department. So if there's anything that we can do, just give us a yell. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.